Hi, I'm Christina Dennis, and you are listening to the Recovered Life Show. Every week, we bring you a Recovered Life discussion about rewiring your brain and how understanding your brain will help you fully live your best recovered life. Remember, addiction is a life-threatening condition, and the information in this discussion is provided as a resource only and is not to be used or relied on for any diagnostic or treatment purposes. This is not a substitute when professional diagnosis or treatment is needed. Now let's jump into the discussion.
As always, welcome to Recovered Life Discussions. My name is Christina Dennis, and I am a recovery coach who focuses on childhood patterns that bring people to codependency behaviors. And so I love recovery, and I love the discussions that we have in this room. A couple of ground rules. This is a discussion, so please feel free to come up and join and talk and share your thoughts. But because this room is recorded, I want to make sure that people feel as safe as possible. So we use first names only, and we're always respectful to others. We have been, in this particular room, Rewire Your Brain, been doing a deep dive into Brene Brown's Atlas of the Heart. And it's been going on for many months. And if you're new, the chapters have been broken down, I think, just at an amazing in-depth conversation level, and they are all available for replay. And so if you've heard of the book, if you haven't heard of the book, if you're reading it or if you haven't read it, it's okay, because we have been taking each chapter and diving into it. And so you are welcome here. Happy Friday to you, Kathy. I hope you've had a beautiful day.
Hello, it's too hot to move, so
Oh no!
it is 76 degrees Fahrenheit in the UK today, which is not good for us pasty white people. It's brutal. So yeah, we're not used to it, but I'm good. It's a beautiful day, beautiful day.
That's true. You don't have. I know that there's been heat waves the last couple of years in Europe, and you don't have the same kind of air conditioning and things like that that a lot of places have, right?
We have no relationship with air conditioning at all. Every new build now seems to make provision for it, but and a lot of offices kind of converted. But I'll shut up.
No, I think that's so interesting. So one of my favorite parts about Recovered Life and Clubhouse in general is that we learn what's going on in everybody else's life. So I'll jump in. This chapter is named Places We Go to Self-Assess. And just a quick background or reminder to people who've been in this room, Brene Brown broke down 84 emotions or words that we describe as emotions in this book. And the purpose of it was to make more meaningful connections. And it's just been a really yummy conversation for, I think, people in recovery. I think it's well known that Brene Brown just celebrated 25 years. And I just love her approach to vulnerability and shame. And I think it's been very, very healing for me to deep dive into it. And the premise of the book, for way back into chapter 1, was that when we have correct language around feelings, when we have a better understanding of what they mean and what they sound, what they are doing to us, and then we have a better indication of how we can feel our feelings, move forward. There's a big thing in 12 Steps that says, feelings aren't facts. And to me, a lot of times these feelings that I have feel like facts, and I know that they're information that help me move forward in my sobriety and my recovery. And so I've just really, really enjoyed it. And next 2 weeks, we'll be closing it down, this entire series based on making meaningful connections. So I hope everybody will mark it. We'll be back on track in Recovered Life, having and hosting our room. So the three emotions are pride, hubris, and humility. And if I don't know of a word or a discussion that, if you follow the text of AA, the big book, talks a lot about pride and humility, and the information around the word hubris was rather new to me. And so I'll just jump into it with this idea that I hope people will come up and kind of share their thoughts around this. I know we have varying degrees of recovery in regards to time here, and I think it's so helpful for everyone in the room to hear others discuss. So be thinking about that as I describe these three words: pride, hubris, and humility. It's interesting that she opens the book by saying, do not Google pride and humility unless you want to go down a sea of memes, Pinterest memes about the dangers of pride or the misgivings of pride. She mentioned the bad corporate slogans in the 80s when greed was good. And it was totally true that we see a lot of people using pride in different ways, and humility. Even in our big book text, it talks about humble pie. And what was very interesting is that most people and most of these memes have it wrong. And I thought that was very, very helpful. So we start off with just a quick comparison of the three words: pride, hubris, and humility. So the actual definition of pride is a feeling or celebration related to our accomplishments and efforts. Hubris is the inflated sense of one's own innate ability that is tied more to the need to dominate than to actual accomplishments. And you may have been familiar, if you do the same thing with the word hubris as you do with pride and humility, you Google it, you'll see that it's been used since 2016. There's a hint there, especially in the world of politics. And then humility is an openness to new learning combined with a balanced and accurate assessment of our contributions, including our strengths, our imperfections, and the opportunities to grow. And I just love to stop right there and see what Kathy and Amber, what are your initial thoughts when I shared pride, hubris, and humility? Kind of the direction you may have thought it, because I definitely, prior to reading this, thought of pride as something that was, dangerous and not something that we should be looking at. Never thought about the word hubris, except kind of in that person's a blowhard, or, they're overstating their accomplishments. And then with humility, I know that my viewpoint on humility has shifted greatly in my recovery, but there was a long period early in recovery where I thought of humility or being humbled, or a piece of humble pie where, somebody being served up justice, and my ego was so overblown that I needed to be humbled. So I'd love to see what Kathy thinks, and then Amber. And anybody else who wants to come up.
I have come across a fair bit of hubris before, not just myself. I did some classical Greek in college, in uni, and it's often tied to shame, and there is a comeuppance for hubris in Greek tragedy always. But those three words are, we would run away. I don't know. I think I have pride with a small p, not a capital P. You can take pride in certain things about yourself. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But if it becomes a capital P, that's when you have to worry. And pride should be something that is worked at, same as anything. If you take pride in your appearance, if you take pride in your accomplishments, you don't just sit there and stop. If you do that, that's when you will. That's when the fall comes, because that's what comes after too much pride. I think we all know that spiritually and classically, and it does happen, because the bigger your ego gets, the more like a balloon it is. It's big, but it's very thin, and it's quite easy to pop. But humility, we were talking about it in another room the other day, and it really made me think a lot, about being humble. And Clubhouse keeps me humble. Some of the shares I heard when I first started coming in here were like, whoa. I have nothing to be worrying about. People have it so much harder, and now it's changed in that, I being humble is something that, again, you have to work at, and it's something that Clubhouse provides for me. I have to come here. I can't get through this sobriety thing without without some help, without some support. And I've always I'd always in the past said I shape my own destiny, and I don't. But I can ride the punches a little easier now. So yeah, I think humility and acceptance are two sides of the same coin. Hubris is, I've already been through it. I think, yeah, I can drink at 4 a.m. in the morning. That's bit me on the ass. And pride, definitely one to keep an eye on. My friends who are into that kind of thing tell me that my star sign means I am a proud person, and keep me in check about it. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to the discussions today about those three words.
Oh, I love it. I had never heard of humility as being an openness to new learning, but I think that's so helpful for anybody. And I loved everything you shared, and you have some insight to hubris if you studied Greek mythology, because I mean, we'll get into the origin of the word, but that's very, very cool. Amber, welcome. How are you today?
Good morning, guys. I'm doing well. This is interesting. So with pride, I was gonna say the first thing that kind of came to me when I think about pride was how much pride I had in how much I could drink and all of that, and how much I like wore that as a crown. And
Yes.
yeah, I was so proud, and it's so weird now that it's like knocked me on my butt. So it's that was a wrestle that I had to deal with. And it kind of took away a lot of like, it sounds weird, but like, when you have pride in like how hard you can party, or all the things that you'll go do, or the kind of parties that you will have or you'll go and be in, and then you get sober or you start recovering or you start getting healthier and that's taken away. It's like, I don't know, it's so interesting. So I have to feel into this a little bit more. And then with humility, hubris, I don't know that feeling. I don't understand it, I guess, yet. And then humility, I guess the one thing that comes to me with humility is in relationships that I have. I think I had brought this up in another room, but like I noticed that coming being able to connect more with others and in a way with humility has allowed me to like have better relationships and kind of not like need somebody to, or I don't know, just the interactions are I need to think about what I'm going to say. But yeah, that's all I have for right now, but I'm listening and I'm allowing myself to kind of think about these. These are cool.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I love that you brought up the pride in drinking, because I certainly relate to that. And I've never really met anybody who, if you are addicted to substance, that didn't have that kind of pride. I mean, well, I'm sure there are people out there, but, I distinctly remember about, I don't know, a couple months before I got sober, the writing was getting on the wall, and I was in the hotel business, and there was a chef on the line who was very, very nice, and he wanted me to try one of his new dishes. And I remember without even a hitch, I said, "Oh, no, no, I drink my calories." And I thought it was just so clever and funny. Oh, no, no, I save my calories for drinking. And I was dead serious. And the look on his face was like shock. And I mean, and in that business, there are more people who drink like I did than there are that don't. And he said, "But that's not good. That's not okay. That's not healthy, Christy." And I remember having this instant kind of embarrassment and anger because he was calling me out. And, I can't remember his name, but I certainly remember his face. And now I understand how dangerous that kind of drinking is. So, Kathy brought it up with little p, and I think that's exactly what I think of now with pride. I mean, what I am after I've read this. It's kind of changed and so many researchers distinguish hubris from pride by referring to the pride we experience from accomplishments as authentic pride. Authentic pride has a positive connotation that describes, it's meant to see if, like accomplishments, mastery, triumph, confidence, and self worth. It's positively associated with self esteem. So if somebody has authentic pride, it shows that they have a healthy self esteem, and it's negatively associated with shame proneness. And many of us know Brene Brown's work on vulnerability and shame. And so I just kind of love that term, shame proneness, because I'm definitely, much more recovered in this area, but I would absolutely say I had shame proneness for many years in my recovery. So the actual research goes on to explain that we don't just have pride about our own accomplishments, that there's actually a family of pride experiences. I can feel proud of myself, and I can feel proud of you, and I can feel proud of other people or even strangers, which I thought that's lovely to think about, because I absolutely do feel pride for somebody who overcomes something, or who they are. I'm very proud of my son being a very kind soul, and so I thought that was kind of interesting to understand. It says that authentic pride is a healthy thing. However, there is some kind of confusion around the word pride. And she has a researcher who's named Rhonda, and she points out that there's another common way that we use the word pride that really doesn't fit in with the definition of authentic pride or the healthy part of pride. And it comes into play when somebody says, pride got in the way. And the two examples she uses are a new college graduate who turns down a job because they thought it was beneath their your qualifications. People will call that being too proud, or you'll hear the statement, he was too proud to accept help when he needed it. And I certainly have experienced that. So which one is right? Authentic pride or pride? And they went on to explain in this book that it actually the when we use word pride in that circumstance, in that scenario, we're using it improperly. That there's many feelings that are going on, and you need more information around that feeling when somebody says pride. And I was curious to see what you two might think about that, because I've definitely used that, and I think that we use it in the 12 steps as one of the one of the character defects. Kathy?
I'm still thinking about this pride in drinking thing, and I'm wondering. I think, and I've done the same, and I would guess a lot of people have done it. I'm wondering, we put that up so people can't shame us, don't we? Yeah, it's like you making a joke, like I drink my calories. That's so nobody can take you to task about it, because you've
Yeah.
already admitted it. You've faux admitted it. You've kind of fake admitted it. It's,
Right.
if you put it out there, people can't have a pop at it. But that's just a thought off my head. Sorry.
No, I love that as a self-protective mode.
Self-protective, and also to protect us from shame. People are shaming us
Yes.
publicly, and it's like, how much did you drink last night? Quiet night, just 2 bottles of wine. You make a flippant remark about it. You take some pride in it. You pretend to take some pride in it, and that stops people shaming us. So that's just popped up in my head.
Oh, I like that. Thank you. Anybody who wants to jump up and share and talk about it, please do. Brenda, how are you today?
Wow, I just wanted to come up and say hello. I'm good, thank you. Um, it's interesting. I think that my early days in program, I my pride came from kind of less healthy things, but then I think now my pride really comes from um, positive things. And what helped me to change was my ex-husband is English, and the a lot of the English don't take a compliment well. And it's like, oh, you look pretty in this dress. And so it really was good for kind of helping me to be more comfortable with having pride. But I think that a lot of my pride, the good pride, comes now in my kids' accomplishments, or being proud of my kids, which makes me think I should probably have more pride in my accomplishments and actions. But one of my most prideful moments was my daughter was doing the meet and greet for Dave Cause. He's a musician, um, and they ran out of food, and so she went in and got the food, which was not her job because she was running it. And he commented to her that he really liked that, she saw what needed to be done and it wasn't beneath her. And so for me, that was just, and I mean, my kids have done all kinds of amazing things, but that was like, wow, I think that was one of the best gifts my dad gave us, was that there was really, nothing beneath us. And but I think I have to watch that. I think too much is coming from is pride for others. So I think I can look at the areas where um, I'm doing well, and start focusing a little bit more on that. And then for me, the being overly prideful probably ties in with it would be areas that I was insecure in, and just as you were saying, where I'm trying to overcompensate. So very interesting, very thought provoking. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Bloom, did you want to jump in real quick before we move on to hubris?
Hi, Christina. Hey, everybody. I'm happy
Hello.
to be here again. And thank you very much, I hope that you can clearly hear me. Actually, it's a nice topic, and I would like to give my opinion on the question you just already told. And I myself, if I want to explain on my own opinion on that, I would rather say that it's better to move on authentic pride, as the person needs to be self-conscious, and it's very important to know what you are going to do, and know about your emotions, and actually what you are proud of that, just so many things that we are doing in our life, and maneuvering on that to represent our dignity or other else stuff. So I myself prefer that authentic pride, as you mentioned, the researches and different studies I have just read before that about these behaviors and goal-oriented behavior. So that is my choice, and I also actually encourage this kind of authentic pride, because many movements, as we see, for example, even you can call sometimes the movements are coming and originating from this authentic pride, as we see that the newly movements around for example, the love for a man, or a man for man, or even a woman for woman. I don't want to tell it is a good one or bad one. I'm just actually explaining my idea that that is kind of, I think that we can shift to that as a kind of pride, that okay, and the person will actually move on that, since he or she thinks that it deserves that. Otherwise, then how a person can move on and to show or to defend the values he or she has. So this is my idea, and I'm very hopeful and grateful for this, as for example, I think that we can have a great movements for that, as if we know what is the right thing, and what we are doing, and what we want in our life, to know it, and to actually to move on that with that goal and value in our life. Thank you very much for the time.
Oh, thank you so much. I agree that this is important, and so appreciate you sharing. I want to move on to hubris, because I wasn't as familiar with this word outside of just thinking that it meant somebody was blowing air, you know. So hubris is an inflated sense of one's own innate ability that is tied to the need for dominance, not actual accomplishments. It's negatively correlated with positive self-esteem, and it's positively correlated with narcissism and shame proneness. The higher the hubris, the lower the self-esteem. The higher the hubris, the higher the narcissism and shame proneness are. Dominance now, I mean, this is kind of interesting to think about. Dominance is a type of status which is coerced through aggression or intimidation. It plays a significant role in hubris. You know, hubristic pride may have evolved to motivate behaviors, thoughts, and feelings oriented toward attaining dominance. Whereas authentic pride was probably brought into our emotions as a way to orient with obtaining positive or prestige. And although Brene Brown says she's not crazy about the word prestige, because she thinks it might sound like they're, you know, being arrogant. However, prestige status is earned. Prestige status-based leaders are admired for their skills and knowledge, which is distinct from dominant status, which is attained by force. So for those of us who are observing hubris in somebody else, it looks and feels terrible. However, to the person who is being hubristic or has hubristic pride, it feels good. They puff up, they bluster, they act superior. Here's the thing that's really interesting. For people who are experiencing hubris, they don't really care what we think. Hubris has an increased level of dominance and it does not require respect or social acceptance. So we here are saying, how can they see that nobody believes them, or how can they say these outlandish things? And what was interesting is to think about the person who is displaying hubristic pride or bases their value on that, their worth. They don't really care what we think. That's why it's possible. Hubris is positively correlated with narcissism. And in Brene Brown's Daring Greatly, she said, she talks about this is of course a word that's being used in the last 6 years around politics or politicians, but narcissism has kind of come into the zeitgeist of our world, and I see it all the time on Clubhouse. We talk about it in Recovered Life. When I work with people who display, or suffer from codependency, sometimes a narcissist will be the other person in the relationship, and she goes on to explain that while the world is correctly associating the patterns of narcissism with grandiosity, pervasive need for admiration, and lack of empathy, almost no one understands how the level of severity in this, no matter what the level of severity in this diagnosis, narcissism is underpinned by shame. Narcissism is shame-based. And so what she goes on to explain, and why I'm using the term narcissism attached to hubristic or hubristic pride, is a globalized hubristic pride is categorized by feelings of arrogance, egotism, which is distinct from the achievement and pro-social authentic pride. And it is essential for a narcissist to have positive views of themselves, but they cannot be connected to actual accomplishment. Because if they tied how they view themselves to what they actually accomplishment, it would be too easy to succumb to shame and low self-esteem. It seems that this is a foolproof way for people to have, to feel like they have worth in our world, because it's not attached to anybody accepting you, and it's not attached to any accomplishment. You don't have to have people respect you to have this kind of hubristic pride. But it comes at a very, very high cost, because the person who displays hubristic pride actually struggles a great deal. They may not need other people to like them, but they have to learn how to be bullies. And they are very, very plagued with chronic anxiety, which forces them to engage in aggression and hostility, and they struggle with intimate partner relationships, and they don't have any social support. And so I want to hear, Kathy, what you said, because I love what I learned in this book about hubristic pride and its Latin, or its Greek, what do you call it? The etymology of a word.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
yeah, and so, hubris was somebody who had such ambition and pride that it offended the gods. And so I'd love to hear what you said, because I never thought of hubris as so dangerous until reading this book.
It really is hubris in Greek, in classics, in tragedy, and in mythology is one of the worst traits you can have, because there's an awareness of it, because it meant, I think it meant outrageous, in Greek, and it's always, if you are hubristic in that world, in the classical Greek world, you always have a fall, and it is associated with shame, and it carries on with other literature like Dr. Frankenstein, or that's always a good example. But yeah, it is in defiance. It is offensive too, because it is putting yourself above your fellow human beings. and it is about humiliating and shaming other people. You can't be hubristic on your own. It's always going to involve other people, and that means it should be punished according to Zeus and Hera and all the others. So it's but it is a trait, and we've seen it more since 2016. We've seen it in the UK in politics, with our own Prime Minister meeting his end yesterday. His hubris finally caught up with him, hopefully. And we do see it more and more, and it's they're up to a point that kind of confidence, self-confidence and arrogance is attractive to people. People want to follow people like that. They come across as so their confidence is such that it influences other people. It's like, well, they sound like they know what they're talking about, so they must be right. I get it on Clubhouse all the time. So yeah, it's always visited by shame at some point. Even ignorance isn't really protection for it. If you look at the myth of Oedipus, who he did ignore what the seer said, but he went ahead and followed his own detective story, and his comeuppance was very grisly indeed. If anybody wants me to go into that, just DM me. I won't waste time here. But yeah, hubris is something to be avoided at all costs, and I think the Greeks would say it is something that is you can do something about. I think that's the warning that is sent to us in a lot of literature. There is a point on that journey where you can stop, and that takes self-awareness. And as you say, a narcissist probably doesn't care, probably doesn't realize, but there is a point where you can stop, and not become that person. Yeah, that's enough from me.
Yes, I was thinking about what you brought up about, the pride of drinking so much, and how that was a way to protect ourselves against shame. And, I don't think there's any kind of, oh, this is what it means, but there's actually physical characteristics that in somebody who displays hubristic pride is I mean, there's actually a physical pattern, and I think this is very interesting for me I'm going to take some time to think about it on the couple of people that I had relationships with that I felt were narcissistic, and so I want to share those because I think it's so fascinating. It talks about, so when somebody is displaying hubristic pride, they have their head downward. They don't look up, which I thought was fascinating when we think about, for me, to think about partners or caregivers that were, suffering from narcissism as well as other mental health issues. And they have a wider stance. Isn't that interesting? Like, because they are looking to dominate. It cannot be based in reality because there's no way they would leave it up to actual facts because it's way too important for us, for hubristic people or people who suffer from narcissism, to hold on to this made up ego. And they don't smile as much. And the reason why I'm sharing that for my sake was that I can tell you that because that was a wounding when I was a child, when I entered into, romantic relationships, I can see now, looking back at some of the people that that I was involved with, and see some of those physical characteristics. So, anybody else want to jump in before we move to humility?
Yeah, okay, now I understand what it is. Yeah, I have I definitely have some people in my family that have had it, and I definitely recognize what you're talking about. It's incredibly uneasy to experience. it makes me wonder if I've ever picked up traits from it. But it's really interesting. Yeah, I remember I have a family member that specifically really portrays a lot of those behaviors, and I just remember feeling like I never want to be like this person, because it's incredibly uncomfortable. But I remember they did have kind of like this to other people outside of the family. It was like people saw them a certain way, or they kind of made themselves be seen a certain way. And it was also like seeing them behind closed doors was also kind of a whole other story. And you really got to see the the shame part of it. So yeah, that's a really fascinating form of pride. I'm gonna look into this.
Yes, yes, and knowing that it doesn't really matter, like they don't care about facts, is something to consider. And I think that uneasy feeling that you're talking about speaks to the dominance. When you find yourself involved with, and we've said this before, only 1% of people actually have true narcissism. There are a lot of narcissistic like traits and behaviors, but only 1% truly have it. And I can look back and see that was directly tied to shame. But at the time, I was like, don't you see you're hurting me? Don't you? And that that fear inside was because they wanted to dominate. And it's very interesting. And we in this country, and I know Kathy in your country, we base our social interactions on a dominance model anyway. And so there is truly a lot of history behind it. And as somebody who's in recovery, it's kind of interesting to think about it, to look at your own stuff and see if there have been times where there was, I had hubristic pride, and a lot of it was fear. But it is interesting, and I want to move on to humility because I love the idea of humility being something positive. And so humility, it comes from the Latin word humilitas, and it is a word that means a groundedness. It is quieter and more genuine, and it is so much more powerful than hubris, which I think is good to remember. We get it wrong a lot when we talk about humiliation and those words, because the true definition as humility is an openness to learning with a balance of an accurate assessment of our contributions, including our strengths, imperfections, and opportunities for growth. And unlike pride, it includes both negative. That doesn't mean that pride isn't healthy, but true humility actually actually encompasses everything that's true about ourselves. And I think that's the authentic person that shows up. And she boils it down to one sentence in all of her research. Because remember, she researched thousands and thousands of people who wanted to discuss this. And it's the sentence she shared is, "I am here to get it right, not to be right." And I thought that was such a beautiful way to say what healthy humility looks like. And I know in 12 steps and in some of the codependence recovery or Al-Anon, and out there just in the world, we often hear, and I've been told this myself, do you want to be happy or do you want to be right? And for many, many cases of disturbances or disagreements with somebody, I use that as a marker for looking at like how important is it for me to be right. And so it's different than pride, since we focus on pride means that you focus on entirely on positives. But there is a term out there that I think Kathy was kind of alluding to, and I feel this very strongly, especially later in my recovery, recovery, because this allowed me to stay right-sized, which is a word we use in 12 Steps a lot. And it says the term intellectual humility refers to specifically to a willingness to consider information that doesn't fit with our current thinking. People who demonstrate intellectual humility do not lack confidence or conviction. Many of them still have a very strong viewpoint, but are also open to understanding other points of view. They are curious and willing to adjust their beliefs when faced with new or conflicting information. Humility allows us to admit when we are wrong, and when we realize that it is more important for us to get it right than to be right. And I just love what she shared there, and I'm going to open it up. I know Emerald just joined us to get some feedback about it, because although she doesn't go into it in this chapter, it definitely strikes me what humiliation, that word is used for, even in our big book text about humble pie. So I'm going to shut up and let others share. We can start with Emerald, since you're new to the stage. What are your thoughts?
Thanks so much, Christina, for bringing me up. And I think my app was messing up earlier, but there were a few things that you mentioned as I've been listening that I was really able to resonate with. First, one thing that you had mentioned in the beginning was a place for reflection. And I really resonated with that, because with my writing, anytime I am bringing something to the forefront, or even at a time where I'm feeling overwhelmed, I really have to find a place that I find peaceful. Even if it is a place where there's a lot of activity, if I find it peaceful, it really does help me with organizing my thoughts and understanding what's happening and what actions I need to do in order to keep moving things forward. Right now, obviously, I'm in a bit of an overwhelmed phase. Court's on Monday, so wish me lots of luck, y'all. Great positive energy and some vibrations for that. And I meet with my attorney today. So one thing that you did mention that kind of resonated with that is I really do work hard at, and about being assertive with communication. And sometimes there is the character of Emerald Khan that is super kind and super nice and really people pleasing. And then there's the real person, Emerald Khan, that's like, damn it, I'm not with it. You know what I'm saying? And there's like this little piece of turmoil sometimes, depending on who I'm speaking with, where I get caught in this little jumble of emotion. And it there's not escape, like there's not always a quick escape route, you know what I mean, to like duck off. And finding the appropriate emotion at a quick moment, or the appropriate response in a quick moment, can sometimes be really challenging. So but the reason I brought that up is because there's this piece of ego that I've really been hearing in there, where it's like, it's almost like a protective thing for the person that is walking around in this shame, you know what I mean? And this guilt and this emotion. And it's like, okay, here's what you're going to see. And this is what I've got. This is what I'm going to give you. So that's all you're going to see. And then dealing with internal turmoil. And I just thought that was really, really interesting, because being an entertainer and living a double life in a matter of speaking, literally, it just reminds me of how people put that front up, you know what I mean, to protect themselves so that folks don't know who they are. And you can't, sometimes people will resonate with the character more because that's all they get to see. And so when you are being yourself, they just don't know who you are. I don't know if that makes any sense. It makes sense for me, because it was really impactful, especially speaking of that sense of pride that is disabling in a matter of speaking, because it's more fueled towards that short term gain and less towards that long term goal. And I resonated with that, and in the aspect of the Greek mythology, like that visualization was super dope for me. So I wanted to thank you all for those points, and just kind of let you know kind of where I am, and do my check in, and I really appreciated these reads today and these points. So thank you so much. I'm Emerald, and I'm done.
Thank you, Emerald. I so appreciate you checking in, and of course, we will send you positive thoughts for Monday. I I'm going to actually share, because I want to leave a little room for anybody who wants to do reflections, the 3 points that she left this chapter with. Of course, I'm listening it to on Audible and have taken massive amounts of notes because it's just been so cool to really dive deep. There are things that I have learned, like the resentment family is envy. And so, anybody who's just discovered this series, please go back and listen to the replays because I think that it's been very powerful. But this is what she wants for us to leave behind. That hubris is a benign form of supersized pride. It's actually dangerous. And I think that's very affirming for me to think about why some people I don't feel safe around at all, and how I have learned how to listen to my nervous system and don't need to have reasons, to walk away. It may explain why, we feel fear when we think about these politicians that have throngs of people following them. It's confused. We want to leave behind the idea that pride is bad for us and that humility is weakness. The 3 main points are: pride can be good for us, hubris is dangerous, and humility is the key to grounded confidence and healthy relationships. And with that, I want to turn it over to Kathy or anybody else who wants to speak up about kind of your final thoughts.
I'm seeing hubris unfold as we speak because we have a leadership, a race for the next prime minister in this country, and people who are clearly underqualified by quite some distance are putting their hat in the ring. I'm getting news alerts every 30 seconds, pretty much. So I'm quite enjoying watching it in action at the moment. These are great topics, and I would strongly recommend reading more about them, especially hubris. It's absolutely fascinating. I have fond memories of studying it, and I hope I've learned something from that. And I've definitely learned something from this room today about what to avoid and what to not panic about if it becomes self-evident in your character, because we can all work on these things. So that's my final word for today.
Thank you. I love that. We can all work on these things. The thought that comes to me is that once again we're living in different areas of gray. That things are never as black and white, and that includes these words that perhaps have been given powers that they don't deserve, like pride, and just for us to continue to dive deeper into what feels right to us. Amber, did you want to reply or?
Yeah, I was just thinking, some of these, it's really interesting to talk about some of these, like pride and hubris and humility, because in a way they can be used for ourselves to kind of keep away connection and to like, they're defense mechanisms, or they're not used properly, or they're, yeah, and I think it's really good that we can talk about them and understand where the shame is coming from, or the, the underlining factors of them, because then we can kind of bring connection back to where it needs to be, because I know that, especially when I was in my struggles, like I had a lot of narcissistic qualities, and I treated, that's how that's just how I was. It was a lot of things that I was trying to protect myself from and such. And so, but then, looking at the shame and also being able to kind of move through these uncomfortable feelings and talk about them like we are, it's honestly opened up so much more room for connection and intention, And I love the part that you said, Christina, about do I want to be right or do I want to be happy? That's a big one. That's so big. And I love that because I've had to I know exactly what that feels like too. And to make that decision is just like really powerful. And I think it kind of empowers the other person too, because it's like, I don't know, it's just like it's like empowering both of us, like in a way, because I don't know. Anyways, yeah, I really enjoyed this. I'm going to be thinking about this today.
Wow, you hit the nail on the head. This is about having more meaningful connections, and understanding what each of us is going through. And I'd love to have a room on narcissism and shame, because I think that, Amber, through your honesty, you really opened up a door that needs to be discussed, especially through the lens of addiction, and some of the behaviors that we have participated in that were narcissistic like, and just that huge confusion around that, and knowing that the base of a lot of our bad behaviors is shame is definitely worth probably having a year worth of conversations for healing. And with that, we're at the top of the hour. Thank you, everyone who came. We will be back next week in the Recovered Life discussions. I haven't been able to figure out this new template to pin a link, but please DM me and you'll get a personal invitation to our community off of Clubhouse, where we, use different types of platforms to stay connected and to be open and to learn about each other and to support each other. But if you haven't joined, it's recoveredlife.us. And I would love to meet you. I know a lot of the people in this room, but I will tell you that this is a very, very cool option, especially if you're new to recovery or if you've had some time. We get to ask each other questions and kind of dive deeper into some of these other subjects that are very, very important for us healing. It's very obvious in our world today that many, many people are hurting. And although this is not a political room, I know that my bringing up, my willingness to be, have intellectual humility and show up for others is part of the solution. And so I very much encourage you, if you haven't joined Recovered Life, please do reach out to me directly, and let's continue to show up for each other. Next week we'll be back on Monday at 9 a.m. where we plan, 9 a.m. Pacific, where we plan our sober week and our intentions for the week. And then Tuesday we will be back kind of wrapping up the connection part of this book, which Amber gave us a fabulous preview of that. And then Wednesday, we'll be back with Setting Healthy Boundaries, where we discuss all things recovery with codependency and adult children of addicts and dysfunctional families.
If you are newly sober, trying to get sober, or you've been sober for decades and are looking to take your sobriety to the next level, the Recovery Breakthrough 6-week transformation concierge coaching program might be right for you. Have Damon Frank and Christina Dennis build a custom roadmap to get you on the path to getting what you really need. Receive hands-on concierge coaching and stay focused and productive with our daily check-ins. If you're ready to experience your recovery breakthrough and start the journey towards the transformation you deserve, book a free get-to-know-you call today and find out what is possible in your recovery. To find out more about Recovery Breakthrough and to book your free call, go to recoveredlife.us. That's recoveredlife.us.